To escape the curse of Galatians, the apologist must call the gospel corrupted. But the Quran commands the Christians of Muhammad's own day to judge by that very gospel. The final defense cannot be made without turning the Quran against itself. This is the seal of the series. The last film closed a chain. 4 problems, 4 locks, drawn from the tradition's own sources, and at its end, the Pauline trap. That to silence the curse Paul lays on the angel, the defender must discredit Paul, and so destroy the very witness who first named Muhammad a prophet. That argument stood complete. We could have ended there, but it left one door ajar. A single escape slipped past in the closing. The defender might say not that Paul alone is corrupt, but that the whole Christian gospel was corrupted, and so its curse cannot bind. This film is a coda. It follows that one door to where it leads. Because the gospel the defender must throw away is the very gospel the Quran commands the Christians of Muhammad's own day to obey. To open this last door, the apologist must reach past the curse and lay his hand on his own scripture. A brief orientation for anyone arriving here first, though the previous film, The Pauline Trap, lays out the full chain in detail. In short, Khadijah's judgment founded the faith, yet by its own law she could not testify within it. Waraka, a Christian, first named Muhammad a prophet and never converted. His Bible, in Galatians 1:8, curses any angel from heaven who brings a contrary gospel. And the Pauline trap showed that to lift that curse, the defender must discredit Paul, which destroys the very witness the tradition relies on. The trap closed firmly. But it closed on one assumption left unexamined, that discrediting the gospel is even an option. The defender's last move is broader than attacking Paul. It is the claim that the Christian scriptures as a whole were corrupted, and so carry no binding authority at all. That is the one door the chain left ajar. We open it now, and we find the Quran itself has nailed it shut. Set Paul aside for a moment and let the Quran speak about the gospel in its own voice. 3 things it says, plainly. First, that the gospel is genuine revelation. In Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5, verse 46, not a counterfeit, not a rumor of a book, guidance and light, the Quran's own words for true revelation, the same words it uses of itself. Second, and this is the decisive verse, that the Christians are to judge by it. The very next line, verse 47, let the people of the gospel judge by what Allah revealed in it. This is a command issued in the 7th century to the Christians living in Muhammad's own time. And the classical commentators understood it exactly so. Ibn Kathir, the great medieval exegete, glosses it, that they should judge by the gospel in their time. You cannot command a people to judge by a book that no longer exists in usable form. The command presupposes the book, a functioning gospel in Christian hands in the year the Quran was being revealed. Third, that without standing on it, the Christians stand on nothing. Verse 68 of the same chapter, uphold the gospel, stand fast by it. Again, a present tense command to 7th century Christians about a book the Quran treats as present, intact, and binding. And once more, in chapter 10, verse 94, the Quran turns to address doubt itself. Ask those who read the earlier scripture. The Quran offers the prior books as a check, a verification. You do not appeal to a corrupted witness to confirm your testimony. The appeal only makes sense if the scripture in Christian hands was sound. So the Quran's position, in its own words, is clear. The gospel of the 7th century was real revelation. It was authoritative. The Christians were commanded to judge by it and stand on it, and it was reliable enough to confirm the Quran itself. Before we bring Paul back, we must close a door the apologist will reach for here. Perhaps the most common of all. He may say, the Injil the Quran honors is not the gospel Christians held. The true Injil was a separate book given to Jesus alone and lost. What Christians carried was only the disciples writing about him, not the revelation itself. So the Quran praises a lost original, and the book with the curse is a different, corrupted thing. It is an ingenious move, and it fails 3 times over, from the Quran, from Islamic theology, and from history. First, from the Quran itself. Every command we have just read is present tense and addressed to living Christians. Judge by what is in the gospel. Uphold the gospel. You stand on nothing until you keep it. You cannot command a people to judge by and stand upon a book that no longer exists. The Quran uses the word injil for the scripture in their hands in their own day. It never says the injil was lost. It says, uphold it. The lost book theory contradicts the very verses it is trying to escape. Second, from Islamic theology. In Islam, a prophet's whole office is to deliver his revelation. Moses delivered the Torah, Muhammad delivered the Quran. To be a messenger is to transmit the message. So a revelation given to Jesus that Jesus never passed on would make Jesus a failed prophet, a messenger who received the word and lost it. Islam holds Jesus among the greatest of the messengers. If he was a true prophet, then what he received reached his disciples, because delivering it is what being sent to deliver it means. The disciples are not a corruption of the Injil. They are the channel through which it entered the world. Third, from the record. There is no moment in history where a pure Injil existed and then vanished before the Gospels were written. The line is continuous. Jesus taught his disciples. The disciples in their circle wrote within the 1st century. That scripture was copied without a break. Greek, then Syriac, Latin, Coptic, through every century down to the great codices, and it was the very book in the hands of the Christians of Arabia in Muhammad's day. There is no dark century, no empty room for a lost original to hide in. The message Jesus received passed to his disciples and has been in continuous Christian possession from the 1st century to the 7th and beyond. Note carefully what this does and does not claim. It does not claim the gospel was flawless. That is a separate question we need not settle. It claims only that the Injil, the Quran honors, and the gospel Christians held are the same book. One physical scripture in continuous Christian hands, which the Quran commands them to uphold. And that one book contained Galatians. With the lost book door shut, there is nowhere left for the curse to be hidden. Hold that. Now bring back Paul. Here is the collision the whole series has been moving toward. The gospel that the Quran calls guidance and light, the gospel it commands the Christians of Muhammad's day to judge by and to stand on, is the same gospel that contains Galatians. There was no other. The Christians of 7th century Arabia carry the apostolic scriptures, the 4 gospels bound together with the letters of Paul. When the Quran tells them to uphold the gospel, it is telling them to uphold the book that holds the curse. And so the apologists' last escape, the gospel was corrupted, meets the Quran's own command, and they cannot both stand. Suppose the apologist holds that the 7th century gospel was sound, as the Quran plainly treats it. Then that gospel contained Galatians, whole and authoritative. And the curse upon the angel from heaven stood, in full force, inside a book the Quran itself calls guidance and light. The trap we built in the last film does not merely reclose. It closes with the Quran's own endorsement of the cursing text. Suppose instead the apologist retreats and says the gospel was already corrupt by Muhammad's day. Then the Quran commanded the Christians to judge by and stand upon a corrupted book. It offered a corrupted scripture as a check on its own truth. The Quran, on this reading, endorsed as guidance and light a text it should have known was broken, and in doing so, it erred. To escape Paul, the apologist impeaches his own revelation. This is the seal. The corruption defense was the last door out of the Pauline trap, and the Quran has walled it shut from the inside. The apologist who keeps the gospel sound keeps the curse. The apologist who calls it corrupt convicts the Qur'an. There is no third reading. There is one narrow door left, and it is the serious one. The response a careful scholar will give, not a slogan. We give it its full weight. Islamic tradition distinguishes two kinds of corruption. There is tarif al-lafz, corruption of the actual text, the words on the page. And there is tarif al-mana, corruption of the meaning, a true text wrongly interpreted. And here is the careful apologist move. Perhaps the Quran only ever charged the second. Perhaps the Christians' text was sound, which is why they could be told to judge by it, but their interpretation of it was twisted. The book was real, the reading was wrong. This is a strong and historically grounded position. Many modern scholars hold that the Quran's accusations, concealing, distorting, twisting tongues, describe corruption of meaning, not the destruction of the text. The very appendix to this film acknowledges as much, so we grant it fully. But watch what granting it does. It does not open the apologist's escape. It locks it. Because if the corruption was only of meaning, if the text itself was sound in Muhammad's day, then the words of Galatians were intact. The curse on the angel was on the page, exactly as Paul wrote it. The only thing in dispute is what those words mean, and the words could not be plainer. An angel from heaven, a contrary gospel, let him be accursed. There is no interpretation that turns a curse into a blessing. To escape by the door of meaning, not text, the apologist must keep the text, and the text is the curse. So the careful response, taken seriously, hands us the very thing we need, a sound text in Christian hands in Muhammad's day, containing Galatians 1:8, affirmed as guidance and light by the Quran itself. The narrow door does not lead out, it leads back to the seal. The remaining escapes are narrower still. The gospel the Quran praises was a lost original, not the book Christians held. We close this door in Act 2, and it stays closed. The Quran commands living Christians to uphold the gospel in their hands. A prophet's revelation is delivered rather than lost, and the manuscript line runs unbroken to the 7th century. The Injil the Quran honors is the gospel Christians possessed, the one that carried the curse. The command was rhetorical, meant to shame Christians, not to endorse their book. But you cannot shame a people for failing to keep a book by pointing them to a worthless one. The rebuke only bites if the gospel was genuinely binding. The sharper you make the rebuke, the more authority you grant the text. The corruption happened later, after Muhammad. This is the cleanest concession of all. It means the gospel was sound through the 7th century, which is the only century our argument needs. Galatians was intact when Waraka read it, when Muhammad lived, when the Quran endorsed it. Later corruption, even if real, comes too late to lift the curse. Each narrow door opened lets in the same light. The 7th century gospel was sound, and it carried the curse. The previous film already showed the whole chain locked. We add here only what this coda has found, the 5th link, the one that seals the door the chain left ajar. Recall the 4. Khadijah, who founded the faith but could not testify within it. Waraka, who named the prophet from outside the religion. The anathema, his own Bible's curse on the angel. And the trap in which lifting that curse destroys the witness. And now the 5th, that to discard the cursing book at all, the apologist must overturn the Quran's own command to uphold it. The defense's last exit runs straight into the Quran's own words. Law, boundary, gospel, strategy, and now the Quran itself. The argument has traveled all the way inward, and at the center it finds the Quran endorsing the very book whose curse the whole defense was trying to escape. The last weapon turns in the hand that holds it, and every link, every one, was drawn from the tradition's own canon. Sahih al-Bukhari, the Quran, the early biographies, and the gospel the first witness himself believed, and the Quran itself affirmed. We forged nothing. We set the sources beside one another, and we declined to look away. A book can be opened, or it can be left clasped shut. The Quran asks the Christians of its day to open theirs, to judge by it, to stand upon it, to be measured against it. It is that same open book, guidance and light by the Quran's own word, that carries the curse upon the angel of the cave. None of this decides what any person should believe. A documentary does not settle a soul, and it is not ours to settle. Faith reaches past arguments, and always has. But the record is the record. It can be read closely, or it can be read past. Across this series, we have asked only that it be read closely, and that having read it, we do not pretend we did not. The choice belongs to the believer. The seal belongs to the record. If what we share here strengthens your understanding, kindly like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Share it forward so others can find clarity and truth. It costs nothing, just a click, but your support means everything. You are part of this family.